This week on the Virtual Skeptic, Bob is leaking. Steve smells. Barb has a tangled tail. And Tim is hosting. And maybe we'll talk about something. I'm your host, Tim Farley. Welcome.
Hi.
To the first episode of Virtual Skeptics of 2018.
The last year of humanity. Oh, wait. We're off to a good start.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Hi, everybody.
How you doing?
Hi, Tim.
Did you get everything you wanted for Christmas, Tim?
Yes. I got a hat with Bluetooth in it.
A hat with Bluetooth in it, huh?
It's got speakers built into the room.
Wearable technology.
Yeah.
I have like these. You're supposed to be able to sleep in them. And you can, of course, they're much more comfortable than, say, earbuds. But one of the reasons I was hesitant to get them, they were a gift a couple years ago, was because I figured that everybody could hear it.
Right.
Is that what happens when you put on that hat? Because I can't even imagine.
No, it's quiet enough that I don't think you'd have to put your ear right against my head.
Yeah.
You know what's really cool? Bone phones. The ones that they rest against, I think, your temples.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they you hear it, but your ears aren't obstructed. That's really cool. I love that stuff.
I've not tried them yet.
That's cool technology. All right, so here we are. I am got too many screens here.
It's okay.
Let's go through our panel for this week. First, we have Bob Blaskowitz, CSI conspiracy guy, web columnist, blogger for Skeptical Humanities, and Skepticality contributor. We have Eve Siebert, editor and blogger at Skeptical Humanities and contributor to Skepticality and Insight at skeptic.com. Barbara Drescher, former psychology instructor, blogger at ICBS Everywhere, and contributor to skeptical projects such as Insight at skeptic.com and The Odds Must Be Crazy. And me, I'm Tim Farley, creator of What's the Harm, and some other stuff.
Where's Brian? What have you done with Brian?
Where is Brian? I think he's been carted off by his robots.
Yes.
Either that or the great storm of 2018.
Yes.
Yeah,
what are they calling it? A bomb cyclone?
Cyclone bomb.
Yeah, which sounds bad.
If he was stuck in the storm, wouldn't you guys be hit by that too?
Well, we're going to be.
Even
worse? Well, yeah, we are.
I thought your area was worse.
It may well be.
Yeah,
it's working its way up the coast.
Yeah.
Then it would get to Brian before us.
There's a storm on either coast. There's one on the west too. It's probably not going to come down as far as us, but
is all your stuff still on fire?
It's not snowing there.
No, rain. It's going to be rain. It's probably not going to rain here though.
Is everything still on fire?
The fires are under control. Thomas Fire is almost, they've got control of it. It's really good.
Oh,
okay.
That's good news.
Yeah.
But it's still very, very dry. It's a dry rainy season this year.
Yeah.
I think it's probably just a late rainy season this year, just like last year. It's just getting later. But we'll see.
All right. Well, if you are watching, where are my other windows?
A well-oiled machine, this is.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is, you can tell I wasn't prepared to host tonight. Anyway, if you're watching us live on Wednesday night, you can ask us questions on YouTube, in the chat window there, or you can use the Virtual Skeptics hashtag on Twitter. And first up tonight, in terms of topics, we have Barbara.
Okay, well, Bob and Eve are going to make fun of me because I'm going to talk about something that, believe it or not, I have never heard of.
Oh, I didn't. I don't. know what this is. I've heard stories, but
Yeah.
Really?
have no
Oh,
idea.
I thought it was. I got the impression when I was doing, what little research I did, that it was, rife in literature and, it was all over the place. And
Is it rife in World War II veterans literature, especially the
I
Americans?
don't know, but the first reports were in the 1500s. So 1564 is the earliest report of this thing, but it popped up in my Facebook feed from a friend, and I just was stunned and fascinated by it. It's rat kings.
Ooh.
Yes. Well, see, rat kings, and if Tim, if you'll bring up the first slide, see why it's so fascinating. This is a rat king that was found in 1828 in a miller's fireplace.
Yeah.
So this is 32 mummified rats whose tails are all tangled together. And of course, there were reports of live rat kings, but they were very, very rare, and so they became kind of mythical.
I don't believe this.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of myths around them, and their power, and they thought were to be involved in and witchcraft and stuff like that. There was a rat king discovered in 1963 by a farmer in the Netherlands that has 7 rats. You can see pictures of that on the internet. In that case, they did some X-rays and they found formations of callus at the fractures of their tails. And so what that suggests that the animals were alive for quite some time with their tails tangled, which is one of the reasons why people are very skeptical. So even experts, I don't know how you become an expert on rat kings, but
Rat kingology.
I'll just I'll just defer to them anyway because they call them experts. So what they're really skeptical about is not whether these things exist, because of course we have them, so they exist, but whether they can form naturally. And even some think that that the examples are fabricated somehow, and suggestions have been that their tails were tied after the animals were dead because it would be practically impossible to do it while they were alive. But there are good explanations as to how this can happen. Like they happen upon some sticky substance that makes their tails tangled. But what got me about it was these people are skeptical about it, even though there are examples, documented examples, modern day examples from other species. Now, the reason we probably don't have documented examples of this particular of rats is because the incidents went drastically down when black rats were kind of replaced by these brown rats, which I guess their tails, the black rats had prehensile tails because they climbed a lot. But there's examples of ship rats and things like that. I don't know if they're the same, but anyway, what we have modern day examples of are squirrels, and I've got 2 of them. If you go to the next slide, it's a video of 4 baby squirrels that's on YouTube. You can watch it. These poor little baby squirrels that are stuck together, and they estimate they're about 10 to 13 weeks old. Probably got some sap while they were in their nest where they're very close up, and their tails got stuck together.
Oh wow!
And the part of the skepticism is, how could these animals survive for very long like that? I don't know. I mean, some conditions, I would think, if the conditions were rife, or weren't too bad, they could probably manage to survive for quite some time. If you go to the next slide, there's
Did anyone help those poor little squirrels?
I could not find out. But these squirrels,
Oh,
these are probably adult squirrels or juvenile squirrels. There were 6 of these guys stuck together, and somebody did help them, took them to the vet. You see they got the little mask on,
Yeah.
because they actually had to put them out. eventually, and they cut them apart. They shaved their tails down and just kept working at them until they got them apart. And so there were 6 of these squirrels all stuck together, and they were taken apart. So I just thought it was really interesting because we have these live examples of this happening. It doesn't seem that impossible to me that it could happen naturally even without a sticky substance, that the tails could, if the tails are long enough, that they could get tangled together. And the reason that it doesn't seem that strange to me is it seems like it would be a highly unusual event, a highly unlikely event. It would be very, very rare, but even rare things happen. And I've talked about it on the show before, because I actually wrote a piece for the Odds Must Be Crazy. It's the first thing I wrote for the Odds Must Be Crazy years ago. That actually there's mathematical research about this. There was a great article about that. The story around it was about holiday lights getting tangled up in a box when you toss them into a box, how they appear to tangle in most bizarre fashion that you couldn't imagine how they could get that way. I always think of Slinky. It seems impossible if that somehow these Slinkies get linked together in ways that don't appear possible. It looks like they actually went through themselves. And it's not that happens. It's that when you have such a number of possibilities, such a high number of possibilities, when you toss a string of lights into a box, the number of possible ways that it can fall and get tangled, even small events have to happen when you have enough trials. If you if you have a 30 die that you're going to roll, the chances of all of them coming up one are very, 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 very small. But if you roll all 30 die millions of times, it's going to happen. And the same thing, I think if you've got rats in small quarters and you've got, lots and lots of them in small quarters, enough times, enough places in the world, the unusual event of their tails getting tangled is going to happen. And if you get just 2 or 3 of them tangled, more of them, you've got that knot there, more of them are more likely to get, stuck into it. So I actually believe the 32 rats together might have happened naturally. Maybe there was a sticky substance that stuck them together initially, but I don't know.
I can sort of see it happening more easily, perhaps, to squirrels that have furry tails, long furry tails, than
and live in trees that have sappy,
sappy,
even evergreen sappy stuff. Yeah,
right. Yeah. Rather than horrible naked tail rats. On the other hand, I was also thinking, what are the chances that 2 implements like headphones or something with a cord or a cable placed near each other won't tangle? I think there's no chance whatsoever. In my experience. I know it's anecdotal.
Well, apply that to the Rat Kings. What happens when a couple of rats end up with those things, in the same place, and their tails get stuck? There was one example of that was found of, I can't remember if it was a Rat King or mice. I think it was mice, and there were a bunch of them stuck together, and they were stuck together. They were stuck together by or knotted together with horsehair. So they'd gotten tangled, and their tails got tangled in horsehair, and so their tails got tangled together in the horsehair.
Interesting.
So that that makes sense.
See, what gets me is that you would think that their tails are, kind of, it's rats, for instance, like their tails would be more rigid,
They probably are, but it's
I'm just imagining, I'm just thinking I have a cat.
Rats that...
And you try tying his tail into a knot, and it's not going to happen.
Well, that's why people were saying that it's highly unlikely that these animals got tied together on purpose when they were alive.
Yeah. Right.
If the examples of the rat kings that they found that are dead, they must have been tied together when they were dead, because
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to do it while they're alive. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, that was pretty
I don't know.
gross.
And by the way, Bob, stop
It's gross, but isn't it cool?
It's
No,
weird. It is gross.
It's weird.
involving-
It's freaky
anything
weird.
Involving rats is kind of icky.
This is true. But I just
Yep.
thought it was the most fascinating thing, and I had to. Bring
Okay, so rats are bred in laboratories around the world. Have they ever appeared in laboratory conditions?
No. That was actually brought up in one of the articles. But you consider how many rats there are outside of laboratories, and how few examples we have of rat kings.
Yeah.
But the fact that it shows up doesn't mean that it's the fact that it's extremely rare does not mean that it couldn't occur naturally.
Right.
Is that highly organized or highly disorganized? I'm just trying to figure out where this goes with entropy. Like, I guess tangled phone cords
Disorganized.
are disorganized. Yeah. So, all right. Okay. Damn.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. That's different for this show. Even. that was better than coprolites.
All right.
That should be
Boy,
our
tangle those together.
yeah. Virtual skeptics better than coprolites.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yes.
Let's see if we have any questions. Oops. Happy New Year's.
I thought the name was kind of strange,
Rat King.
Rat
Rat
King.
King.
King of all the rats.
And I think that probably, just
Rat
became
pudding.
common because of the mythology surrounding it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a pizza rat king? You know,
Is that
familiar
an
with
East
Pizza
Coast thing? No. Was that an East Coast thing?
Famous viral video from New York, which I think was later determined to have been fabricated.
Oh, was it
With a rat in a New York subway dragging an entire slice of pizza down the steps.
Oh,
And it was
okay.
known as Pizza Rat, and there were
That's
various
cute.
variations of it.
What?
But I think it came out later that the person had totally staged the thing.
Ew.
Yeah.
Well, whether or not you stage it, I mean, staging it means giving a rat a piece of pizza, right? But and then filming
Right.
it, it's still a rat dragging a piece of pizza down the steps.
Yeah.
And if I
guess.
recall correctly, rats laugh.
They
I
do.
know it has nothing to do
Yes.
with anything.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
weird.
cool.
So if you have, it's the same equipment that you use to listen to high pitched frequencies of bats. If you put it up next to a lab mouse or a lab rat,
And then tell it a really good joke.
and you tickle it, and you tickle it, and you tickle it, and you hear this little squeeze, 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 squeeze.
Are you sure that's laughing and not screaming?
No, because
How
if
do
you
you
move
notice that's
hold on.
screaming?
If you move your hand away,
Uh-huh.
they'll come after it. So they're enjoying it.
Well, they do like touch. We know that because there's lots of rat studies on touch.
So they seem
similar
to be enjoying it.
Yeah, we know that rats and mice and they all thrive on touch when they're babies, as opposed to not being touched. In comparison to not being touched. Okay, I'm looking up Pizza Rat, so I can,
All right.
because I have to see the
I'm
video.
sure half our viewers
You
just went
can
off.
move on. I will. How cute!
All right, so I didn't super prepare a topic, but there is a breaking computer security story, which I guess I feel like I should comment on since that's supposedly what I do for a living today. Allegedly, which is some new bugs that have just been released. Like literally, the papers were released like hours ago because the news was starting to leak to the press. And people had figured out that something was coming along because the folks who do operating systems were starting to release patches. And one of the interesting things that happens in the computer security biz is if you say it's a security patch and you don't give people enough information that they feel satisfied that they understand what you're giving them, they'll take apart the patch to figure out what you actually fixed. So if you lie to somebody about your security patch, people will call you out on it. I actually used to teach a class in this, and one of the lessons we did was how to reverse engineer a security patch to figure out what was actually patched, and therefore what was the bug that they were trying to fix. Because often these patches will come out and they'll sort of vaguely say, well, there was a way a hacker could steal your password, but we're not going to tell you how it works because we don't want to help them. But this patch fixes it, trust us. And then people would take the patch apart to figure out how to steal the password because it would still work on anybody who hadn't installed the patch. Well, anyway, there's a bunch of patches that have come out for Windows and Linux. And as it turns out, the Mac operating system had been patched for this early in December. So it's already fixed insofar as it can be fixed for the Mac. But it's they're known as Spectre and Meltdown because now the new thing in security bugs is you have to give them cool names.
Spectre and Meltdown?
Sometimes a logo. But basically, it's a way for software, including, strangely enough, I was amazed to read this, and I haven't read the entire papers because literally I just found the links for them right before the show started. They were released this afternoon. That even JavaScript running in a browser, normally these types of attacks are things that you have to write very technical code that runs on the processor. But anyway, essentially what it allows an attacker to do is violate the protections on memory in your computer. You know, most modern computers are always running multiple programs at the same time. Like right now I have a video window that I'm talking to you guys in. I've got a Twitter client running over here so I can see people replying. I've got several browser windows. I've got an email client. I've got, all these programs are running. And in order to keep those programs from getting in each other's way, there's various technical functions inside the CPU of the computer that make sure that they can't see each other's memory, that literally even if they wanted to step on each other, they couldn't. Because the memory is literally kept in a separate virtual space. Well, someone has figured out through a very technical way involving the way ifs are handled. In order, you know, one of the things that's happened with processors in recent years is they've run out of ways to make things faster the old-fashioned way. It used to be chips got twice as fast every 2 years. Hertz processor and your 2 megahertz processor and then gigahertz or whatever. Well, there's a limit to how far you can push that because at some point your processor becomes like a microwave oven and starts broadcasting TV signals that interfere with things. You can't speed it beyond a certain point, and then there's a point where there's a limit to how small you can make the circuits to make them fast enough, simply because you can't cut slices that small in chips. So they've gotten increasingly clever in the way they design processors to find other ways to make them faster. And one of the ways that they've done that is every time a processor now comes to an if statement, it used to be that it would branch off, and that would potentially cause a slight slowdown because normally processors are kind of looking ahead and figuring out and loading up the next instruction. And as soon as it has to do an if and go somewhere else, it loses all that because it has to jump over here and start looking ahead over there. Well, the most modern processors in the last couple of years, what they would do is they would do both. like the processor would be looking ahead and say, oh, here's an if statement. I don't know what the answer to this if is yet. I don't know if I'm going to go left or right, but let me go and look at the left and right paths, and I'll start evaluating what's going on in the left and right paths. So I've got it all loaded up. And then once I make the decision, I'll throw one set away and execute the other set. Well, people have figured out that they can actually exploit that, because in order to evaluate the unused set, they have to load it into memory. And that causes timing issues with whether or not those memory locations are available or not. And people have figured out how to exploit that and essentially turn it into an exploit where they can read any memory anywhere in the processor, including memory that you're not supposed to be able to touch. And this is very scary. Now, the operating system patches that are rolling out right now for Linux and Windows work around this by essentially every time they switch control to your program, they take all the parts of memory that are the operating system and the stuff that your program's not supposed to mess around with, and make it go away, send it to the cornfield. And let your program run, and then when it needs to do something in the operating system, they pull it back in. Now, of course, that's not a zero cost item, so this patch is actually going to slow computers down.
Yeah, that's what I heard. By how much?
They're saying like 15 to 30%, depending on how often your program.
I can't afford that much.
Yeah. It depends on how often the program you're running makes calls to the operating system and how often those switches have to happen. One of these bugs, and frankly, like literally, I haven't read the papers, so I'm not sure if it's Spectre or Meltdown. I think Meltdown is the one that they have the operating system patches for. The other bug, there literally is no patch for. Like, they're going to have to change the processors in order to solve that bug. The chip manufacturers, and it's been talked about in terms of Intel processors, because those are the ones that we have in most of our PCs and Macs and a lot of other devices like bank terminals and who knows what. But it also affects ARM processors, which are the ones that you see in these type devices, or at least the newest ones of those. So this is a pretty big deal, and you're going to be seeing it in the news over the next few days.
How did this vulnerability get? I mean, it's so widespread, and I don't understand how. And how long has it been this vulnerable?
Well, it's pretty sophisticated in exploiting it. So, it's one of those things that only if you're really looking for it are you going to find it. And frankly, if you had told me that you could exploit this thing using JavaScript, I would have told you were crazy. But apparently, these guys have figured out how to do things just in JavaScript. JavaScript is the language that, the fancy stuff in your web browser run in, and it's interpreted language, and not for very sophisticated types of programming. And yet they figured out ways to do it in JavaScript, which means that eventually a malicious web page could possibly start doing some of these attacks. So that's pretty scary.
Would that make, when it says it makes you vulnerable, does that mean it makes you vulnerable to being taken over by someone remotely, or?
Well, potentially what it means is that a piece of software could steal private information. Like, for instance, there are places where your computer has to store passwords for you. So, for instance, when you go to log back into Amazon.com, somewhere in memory or on disk, there's if you have it turned on, there's a stored copy of your Amazon password, and it'll fill in that box with the dots in it, so you can just hit enter.
Yeah.
And programs like this could potentially go get into that memory and steal things like that, that they shouldn't be able to touch at all. And so that's the idea, is that they could steal private information, and it's particular interest to, in the business world, people who run cloud computers, the whole cloud thing, or run your stuff in the cloud. One of the fundamental things that happens in the cloud is you don't have, like in the old days, one computer did one thing. So if I had a web server, it was a web server. But in cloud, one computer in Amazon's data center might be running 6 different websites, and they might be from different customers. And so the potential exists that since people like Amazon let anyone sign up to use their cloud, I could sign up and load a malicious program into my cloud my cloud instance, and use that to attack other companies or clients of Amazon's that just happen to be sitting in the same processor that I'm in. I might not be able to target a particular company because it would be very hard to know where Amazon would put you, but I could target whoever happened to be put into the same CPU as me.
Wow.
And steal whatever they happen to have there that would be worth stealing. So
is this Y2K level bad?
It's pretty bad. They've already got the patches for Linux, which is what runs most web servers. So that's, the patches are available, but of course they have to be applied, which means a lot of IT people at Amazon and at various other cloud providers like Rackspace are going to be doing some late nights over the next few days, loading these patches onto servers to make sure that their servers don't get attacked. Supposedly, especially if you're running a late model Mac and you have kept your operating system updated to the latest High Sierra, you're already protected. And there will be an additional patch to protect, or at least you're protected against the one that you can be protected from. And there are some Windows patches that are due soon. So anyway, as I always tell everyone, load those patches. When people tell you there's a security update, load it. Because this one's pretty bad, and you need it.
Unbelievable.
So watch for that in the news over the next few days. It's going to be all over the headlines.
Yeah, I saw it today. It was scary.
All right. So who is next? Oh, let me see if we had any questions. Not that I.
Are there any answers? I'm more interested in getting the answers than I get the questions.
The answers. We have no answers. No. So we will go right on to Eve.
Okay, well, my story is a little more optimistic. Joy Mill of Scotland has an extraordinary sense of smell. When her husband Les was 45, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And he died 20 years later in 2015. It gets more cheerful. But between 10 and 12 years before his diagnosis, Joy noticed an odd on him. She says they actually sort of went through a difficult patch when he was in his mid-30s because she kept insisting that either he hadn't showered or he hadn't brushed his teeth, and he kept insisting that he had. And eventually she just sort of shut up about it. After his diagnosis, the couple joined a Parkinson's support group, and she noticed the same smell on other Parkinson's patients. After she told scientists at a conference about this ability, she was tested. And I'll talk a little bit more about the test later, but basically, she was given 12 unmarked T-shirts. 6 had been worn by Parkinson's patients, and the other 6 were the control group. And she got 7 out of 6 correct.
Okay.
In other words, she correctly identified all the people who had been diagnosed with Parkinson's, but she also identified one person in the control group
Okay.
And then 3 months later, she found out that that person had been diagnosed with Parkinson's after the test.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Parkinson's generally is diagnosed based on symptoms. So far, there's no test for it.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time the patients are diagnosed, 60 to 70% of the neural damage has already been done. Because of Joy's abilities, scientists were able to isolate 10 molecules distinctive to Parkinson's sufferers. And this may lead to earlier diagnosis and consequently perhaps more effective treatment. And this, now go with me, this may seem like a tangent, but it's related. Recently, researchers announced a breakthrough treatment of Huntington's disease. The treatment seems to stop the disease in its tracks. Now, Huntington's is awful, horrible disease. I saw it described as like a horrible mixture of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and
ALS,
something else.
All of them, at once.
But there's a genetic test for it, which, currently is sort of a double-edged sword. Because, if you test positive, you're going to eventually suffer just horrible death.
Won't you suffer whether you test or not?
Well, that's true, but it's hanging over you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a student several years ago who was an identical twin with Huntington's in the family, and they together decided they did not want to know.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's just it doesn't make it not happen.
Oh no, no.
I think a lot of people avoid stuff. It's like if you ignore it, it'll go away. No, it won't.
Yeah. Well, but if this treatment is as effective as it seems, people can be treated before they begin to show symptoms. And again, although they're not calling it a cure, it really seems to just stop it. And the Huntington's breakthrough, and this is how this is related, also offers a ray of hope for other neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and other dementias. Put somewhat oversimplistically, they are all caused by the buildup of destructive proteins in the brain, although different proteins are involved in different illnesses. In the Huntington's treatment, though, the drug actually blocks the gene that corrupts the protein that then attacks the brain. So it doesn't directly affect the protein, but still it apparently does offer a new avenue of study for other neurodegenerative diseases. Regardless, earlier detection of Parkinson's means earlier intervention and treatment, potentially slowing the progression of the disease. I think now, at the moment, they're trying to train dogs to detect the smell. And if a cure or remarkable breakthrough in treatment is discovered for Parkinson's, it can be administered before a lot of irreversible damage is done. And that would be good. But I want to go back for a minute to the test. Joy Mills' claim that she can smell Parkinson's up to a decade before diagnosis could be classified as an extraordinary claim.
Mm-hmm.
Some people on the International Skeptics Forum, which used to be the James Randi Educational Foundation Forum, were discussing whether such a claim would have been eligible for Randi's $1 million challenge when it was still a thing. And most said no, because it's not a paranormal claim. But a few thought it might be. Randi was willing, for instance, to test people who claimed they could tell the difference in sound quality produced by insanely expensive cables versus nearly overpriced cables. And this was intended primarily as a test of cables, but it also would have served as a test of an individual's oral sensitivity and acuity. But regardless, in several ways, this situation is different. Joy Mill sought out scientists because she wanted to find an answer. She made a promise to her husband that she would follow up on her ability. She wasn't trying to use her skill for gain or for publicity. She wants to help others so they don't suffer the way her husband did. She was also perfectly happy to submit to a blinded scientific test with proper controls because she wasn't simply interested in proving her claim right. She wanted to find the answer. I know I already said that, but it's important. She wanted to find an answer, not get money. And the test was simple. She agreed to it. She passed it with at least 100% accuracy, possibly a little more. Although I know numerically that doesn't really work, but still.
Oh, you just scared Barboy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
So she proved her extraordinary claim. Other extraordinary claims like dowsing, telepathy, telekinesis, etc., have also been submitted to simple but rigorously controlled tests, and they have failed. Possibly, just possibly, it's not because of the presence of evil skeptics that scupper these tests. It may, I know it's crazy, it may be perhaps that those extraordinary claims are false. But again, this is evidence.
You went there. Yes, you did. You went there.
But this is evidence that extraordinary claims, like rat killings, perhaps, can sometimes, without great difficulty even, be provided with the sufficient, the appropriate extraordinary evidence to prove they're true.
I am still skeptical.
Okay.
I'm skeptical because the one thing that you cited was a very, very small sample. And it seems to me that that if you're going to test something like that, that's not extraordinary evidence.
Right.
That she got 7 out of, I don't know how many, 12.
Yeah.
That's not extraordinary. I would want to see that replicated, and I would want to see...
I think there have been more tests. The test started in 2015. I think there have been more tests since then.
This has been bouncing around the British press for the last 2 years, I can tell you that.
Has it?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think it came up again because I think there's a BBC documentary about it.
Mm. Well, there are examples of, say, dogs being able to smell. I'm very skeptical of the cancer claims. But there are examples of dogs that are that can tell, whether if you're having a seizure. There are people that have dogs because they're diabetic, and so I mean there are, and it makes sense that if there are proteins involved, that you might give off some of those proteins, and it's not. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't believe it, because I think that there are probably people who can smell some. I mean, my sense of smell is pretty strong, but I would want to see. I'd want to see better testing than what you described.
Right. As I said, I think that was a preliminary test. I think there have been more tests since then. And as I said, as a result of the tests with her, they did identify molecules specific, I think it's on the skin, that are specific to Parkinson's patients. The other thing is, in a little video clip on the BBC, I think she says, and this is Joy Mill, that she says, if you talk to like Parkinson's patients or a family or carers, they'll say there is a distinct
odor.
So, and there are a number of illnesses that do give off an odor. So I think the unusual thing, really unusual thing, is that she can identify the smell so much earlier.
Right.
Maybe.
Huh.
But something's not an extraordinary claim. Just also, it's not necessarily an extraordinary claim just because the person's unique, or because nobody else has made the claim before, or I don't know, or just because nobody's noticed there was a smell.
Mm-hmm. Well, you go up to a scientist, which I believe this has happened. I can smell Parkinson's.
Yeah, it does sound like
an extraordinary claim.
It does sound like an extraordinary claim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and if it sounds like it may just be her olfactory system may just be a little different from other people's, so that these just happen to be picked up. She must be more sensitive to these particular molecules, and that's just wild chance, So I mean,
there is variation.
Yeah,
there's that documented thing with people's eyes where you can have an extra type of color cone.
Yeah.
Tetrachrome. And so literally there are people who can see colors more distinctly than other people because they have
also there's
different
variation
types of cones.
There's also slight variations in the cone type itself. There's slight variations in range and so forth. So
sure.
It's not, and with olfactory senses, there's something called super tasters, which I'm one, and that may be why my sense of smell is so good. And that's, you have receptors that are sensitive to chemicals that and interpret chemicals that are slightly different than the majority of the population.
So, like when you eat a caterpillar, it tastes really good, right? That's what that is.
Probably, yeah. No, it's like things like Brussels sprouts taste like ashtray to me, and they smell bad too.
They're horrible.
Well, you may be a super taster as well.
No, I just have sense.
No, there's actually I remember learning about it in when I was in college, when I was very, very young, like right out of high school, in college, and in a class where one of my teachers was talking about it, and he brought these things that were like litmus paper. It was just these little strips of paper, and he handed them all out, and then he's talking about something, and he tells us to lick it, and I just was like, oh my God. I mean, just like yelled it. And the entire class is staring at me. There's 50 people in this class, and I am the only one who understood why this thing was absolutely disgusting. And I couldn't figure it out. They're just, like, what are you talking about? What's wrong with you?
Were you the only person in the
class?
The
only one.
Who actually licked a piece of paper just because the teacher told you to?
No, we all did. We all did. It was. I'm a freak, though. I mean,
you should lick a Parkinson's patient, is what we're saying.
Only with consent.
That's gross.
Yeah, you gotta ask for permission first.
Yeah. Get it in writing.
Sign something.
Get it in writing.
Yeah. Totally.
I've seen Parkinson's writing, and
well, if there's a tail end of there's a tail end of distribution. Yeah, there is that problem. There is a tail end of the distribution. I'm on it. So, but I get it. There are tail ends of the distribution, and this woman's probably on it for that particular whatever chemical it is that is that
on the skin.
Is given off. Yeah, well, that is given off by Parkinson's patients. She's sensitive to that particular chemical. So
I have a family member who has Parkinson's, right? And
I also have a family. My mother also had Parkinson's.
Yeah, and if anything, I'm not sure what you could do if you were to get it earlier, if you're able to detect it earlier. Maybe there's some capacities you could build up ahead of time, but the neurodegeneration is pretty steady.
Well, we have pretty good drugs now. I mean, we get it more, just like Alzheimer's. We're getting more and more treatments as time goes by, and better treatments.
Yeah.
I mean, look at how long Michael J. Fox has been living with it.
I don't know how he's done that.
That was 30 years ago. That was unheard of. I mean.
Yeah.
He had unusually early onset too, didn't he?
Yeah, there's something different about his.
He had early onset, but it behaves in the same way. The degeneration's the same and just continue to degenerate. So it is a degenerative disease.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yep. All right. Where are we at? Oh,
maybe drinking special water would help.
That's a good segue.
Yeah, that's a great segue.
That brings us to Bob.
It
Tell
sure
us about
does.
special water.
All right, so I'm going to start with a bit of scripture. Revelations, chapter 8, verses 12 and 13. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark. A third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. Then I looked, and I saw an eagle crying with a loud voice as it flew directly overhead. Try raw water. It's more natural or something. Yes, I'm pretty sure that raw water is the fourth trumpet.
Raw water.
It's, I just, like...
Raw water.
I read this, and there are moments where you go, like, what's the fucking point? We do this, and I understand that we're educating a parade, and that we're going to see the same stuff over and over, and just every so often you just want to wall yourself up in the basement.
We don't have a basement.
I know. that was a real oversight.
First, you have to build it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and so this did two things. This showed that there really is no limit to human gullibility, and also that the secret doesn't work because nobody has bestowed on me Judge Dredd-like authority to fix the stupidity.
Well, Bob,
that's all I want. That's all I want.
One word. Breatharian.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
If you knew about them, it shouldn't surprise you.
Yeah. So, all right. This one started in the New York Times with an article that was called Unfiltered Fervor, the Rush to Get Off the Water Grid, but which might have more honestly been called Look at These Assholes Conning These Other Assholes, with the subtitle, Everyone in this article is either a con man or scientifically illiterate. Be nothing like them. It's only the first half is saturated with these types of people. In the second half of the article, people are like, well, I'm very concerned that these people don't believe in things like basic sanitation. Let's explain what this raw water thing is. It's water from springs, creeks, and rivers, and also whatever the hell else is in those water sources.
Well, isn't another possible title of the article Fun with Cholera?
Yeah, I know, right? This is just your local flora in the water because it's natural. Cholera, totally natural.
It's true.
So how is it raw, you may ask? Well, it's not. The phrase is meaningless, but it benefits from the nutritional religion of raw milk cultists who only occasionally lose children to diseases that can be found in unpasteurized milk. It also benefits from the whole living food movement. Has anyone come across this before? It's popular among cancer quackery, which is, it's like veganism, but you don't cook it. So it's like veganism plus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So take, for instance, the guy...
it's been around for a long time.
Yeah. Take, for instance, the guy, Christopher Sanborn, who owns a company called, well, it's either Live Water or Live Water. I don't know. And even though he looks exactly like J.P. Sears, he goes by the name Mukande Singh. And I just wanted to read to you a few of the most aggravating lines ever published in the New York Times, which is no mean feat given some of the shit they published recently. Pure water, quote, can be obtained by using reverse osmosis filter, the gold standard of home water treatment. But for Mr. Singh, the goal is not pristine water per se. Quote, "You're going to get 99% of the bad stuff out," he said, "but now you have dead water." He said,
Wow.
I don't want water that can crawl away. I'm just going to say that right now.
That's paragraph 1 of 3, Barb. Strap in.
Dead water.
He said, quote, "Real water should expire after a few months. His does. It stays most fresh within 1 lunar cycle of delivery," he said. "If it sits around too long, it'll turn green. People don't even realize that because all their water's dead, so they never see it turn green."
Oh my God.
I would say look in my bathtub. Okay. Don't. Please don't.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Mr. Singh believes that public water has been poisoned. Quote, "Tap water? You're drinking toilet water with birth control drugs in it," he said. Chloramine, and on top of that, they're putting in fluoride. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but it's a mind control drug. Yeah, I know. It's a mind control drug that has no benefit to our dental health, which is, of course, horse hockey.
So yeah, fluoride is the shittiest mind control drug ever.
Yep.
Why? People always drinking it.
Yeah. Have you been able to control the minds of any of the people who've been drinking fluoride?
It just makes you dumber and more manipulable, is the claim.
Yeah, I know. I've met these people too.
Yeah.
It's a slow kill. Do you remember that?
It's a slow kill. The vaccine guy at the
what in the crap are they spraying?
Yeah, in the chemtrail movie, there was the guy who was saying, vaccines are a slow kill.
No, he also talked about fluoride.
Oh, did he? It must be real slow because.
Yeah, we pointed that out.
Yeah. I don't think we convinced him.
Yeah, no.
All right, so why would somebody willingly reject one of the most important public health measures of the last 200 years to willingly expose yourself to the sanitary conditions of, say, the people of Yemen or Haiti? Well, it helps, first of all, if your interior life is constructed of little more than marketing terms and ignorance. That helps a lot.
Post-Hurricane Haiti, we should perhaps say.
Yes, that's true. Post-Hurricane Haiti.
Disaster.
When there's no infrastructure, right? The most irking thing is that raw water, which is, as far as I can tell, was not really a thing before Christmas, has now appeared not only in the New York Times, which is where this story started, but in the Washington Post, the USA Today, and the Guardian, and lots of other periodicals, often where it's being pimped by this guy, Doug Evans. This is the jackass who was selling $700 juicers that didn't fucking work.
The things that just squeezed out it was basically something that just squeezed a pouch for you?
Yeah.
Was that the one?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
it's not actually a juicer.
Oh, I didn't realize it was the same guy.
Yeah, he's selling this. This is his next. You
can't call that a juicer. It's a toothpaste tube squeezer. It's all it is. It's not a juicer.
Oh, Lord. Okay, so it's even sadder, right? But the thing is, why is this asshole, why is he keep showing up in my fucking newsfeed?
Because
he's P.T. goddamn Barnum is what he is.
Yes, and you follow those people.
Oh, shit.
Mm.
I have something to do with this.
Yeah.
With it showing up in your newsfeed? Yeah.
Oh, fuck.
It doesn't show up in my newsfeed, and it should, but
I should wall myself up in the basement. I was right.
But you're not responsible for why it's spreading.
These people thrive.
It goes up on the New York Times every other.
It gets picked up elsewhere, and it has the veneer of being a real story. But it strikes me like the flat earther craze. It's the most recent stupid thing that people start talking about, and then it spreads, exposing itself to as many dupes as possible. I really do. Yes.
And they're selling this raw water for ridiculous amounts of money, much like the juicer. It's like
$6.50 a gallon or more.
60.
As if we don't already spend enough money on stupid bottled water when we all have it piped into our house already.
The stupid bottled water, it doesn't contain E. coli.
That's nice. For a change.
Bonus
It doesn't
salmonella.
give you Grant's disease, by which I mean diarrhea.
Mm.
Yeah.
I promised Grant Ritchie that I would refer to diarrhea as Grant's disease.
Oh.
Oh.
Follow your bliss, whatever.
Proud he must be.
I know. Yeah. So yeah, I'm really kind of frustrated with people giving these charlatans free publicity. This is what they thrive on, and these newspapers are enabling these attention-seeking loons. Much like, I'm not going to talk about the president.
Please don't.
Yeah. If you follow Mike Marshall of the Merseyside Skeptics, who also works for Simon Singh's Good Thinking Society in England, has done a lot of good work to get homeopathy defunded from the NHS and whatnot. But one of his little passion projects is unmasking how much of the crap press in England in particular is just driven by press releases that are driven by companies. Yep. And a lot of articles that you see about products are that way, and that's just the nature of promoting a product. And you're reading a magazine about computers, and here's an article about a new computer, and literally it's just a bunch of regurgitated material that came from the company. But it's sad to see when things like the New York Times and the Washington Post are falling for this crap. One of the things he's pointed out a lot is you get a ton of these because even at crappy newspapers, journalists are a little bit aware that they can be used as tools to promote money-making things, that they would couch it in something other than a product push. So they would do like a super cheesy survey of, what do women want for Valentine's Day or whatever,
water.
Something that has a hook in it.
Cholera.
That the and inevitably he's found that it's always, I forget what it is, it's always in the third paragraph where you discover what company was behind the survey.
Yep.
And if you just know how to read these articles, you can instantly figure out what the product was, why they decided to use this survey, because there's always some product that solves the problem that the survey points out. And the surveys are always terrible, terrible, non-scientific, just low end numbers, just, nonsense data. But they always come up, a survey shows that this is true. No, it doesn't show that at all. You've just been manipulated by someone trying to sell chocolates or vacation homes or whatever the product is. And this is just the Silicon Valley version of that. I dug around by Googling this guy, and there was an article back in September where he apparently started this fad. I guess it's taken from
that's right after his juicing company went under.
Exactly. It's just Juicero went under, and he had to look for a new thing. And apparently all sorts of versions of starving yourself or not eating. It's funny you mentioned breatharianism, because they talk about how a lot of people in Silicon Valley are getting into fasting. And apparently that's how he got into this raw water thing, was he was fasting, but he wanted to also drink water.
It was because there was every article that quoted these people had some completely off the wall statement that was just a little nugget of gold. You know, there's one where they said, well, I don't think we should call it raw because that suggested it could like rot. So we should call it live water because people who like physics and biology will go, "Hey, is this alive?"
Yeah.
Like that was.
I mean,
that
literally, any journalist should do 5 minutes of investigation, figure out that this is the Juicero guy. And
they mentioned that it's the Juicero guy. They mentioned it. They brought it to, and then they still
did they
ran
not
with
realize that Juicero was the biggest stupid scam? Oh my God.
I think some of them, you know, they show a certain amount of skepticism, but just, or you could have just.
But they always save
content.
it for like the
It's
last
content.
paragraph of the article.
Oh yeah, no, it's not. They foreground the crap.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's criticism. There's good, legitimate criticism by people who are expert in infectious diseases and that sort of thing, talking about like, yeah, sometimes if you don't filter your water, you will have carcinogens. You'll have carcinogens. Man, get the accent right, people. Parasites, and what happens if you have a bunch of deer upstream who crap in the stream? Well,
absolutely,
you're going to get whatever they have. You know, like.
I'm surprised they didn't just end up quoting a bunch of experts going, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
Yeah, I liked when Jim Lippard tweeted this New York Times article on December 31st when it was published. His tagline on the tweet was, "Looks like the folks who brought back measles and whooping cough want to do the same thing for cavities and cholera."
Yeah.
No, that's and it. You know, I think there's somebody in there mentioned that they say, you know, I had a patient ask me about this, and it's people who haven't seen cholera because we had one instance of cholera, I think, last year, in the United States, and it had to be imported. I'm pretty sure. You know, like you forget that these episodes, like cholera, wrenches all of the fluid from your body and blows it out your ass in a few hours.
A terrible, terrible.
It's a horrible disease.
And Bob's description of it.
Yeah, we're a victim of our own success.
Exactly.
Yeah. We've seen these diseases so little that we have forgotten how to fear them.
Yep. And that's how the world's going to end.
Yeah. I thought about doing a video one time. There was a one time I had some I forget why I got into this, but it was I found this website that it's for genealogists basically because they're the people who use this information most usefully. But essentially, they were crowdsourcing catalogs of cemeteries. Right. So people go and record the information that's on the headstones. Right. It actually was Find a Grave, and it was crowdsourced information. And there was a point a few years ago where I was between jobs and I had some free time on my hands. And it's like, oh, I'll do some of the, you know, people are asking for info on local cemeteries. I'll go do one. So you go and you look for requests for cemeteries that are near you. And it's like, oh, that one's like 2 miles away. I'll go find that gravestone and send the guy the info. And they ask for a photo, and you record the info that's on the headstone and tell them where the exact location is. And, you know, you help somebody out on their little genealogical quest. But one of the things I discovered, I went to there's a famous cemetery in Atlanta called Oakland Cemetery that you see on tours. But actually the biggest cemetery in Atlanta was the one that opened after Oakland kind of filled up in the mid to late 1800s. In the late 1800s, they opened one called Westview, and it's huge. It's absolutely gigantic. And it's one of those, you know, that they started having in the late 19th century kind of garden cemeteries, where it's a lot of rolling hills. It's very pretty.
Landscape park type stuff.
And I got into the section where this person was, fortunately, that cemetery actually has an office and you can go and look up stuff. Not all of them do. And I got the info for this person that somebody wanted the location for. And it happened to be right next to the section where they buried all the kids back in 1800s. And one of the things that occurred to me would make a very interesting YouTube video would be to just do some videos going across headstones of the kids sections of cemeteries and pointing out the diseases that we have vaccines for now that killed these kids.
Oh yeah.
You know, because in the
If
1800s,
those are on the stones.
huh?
If that information's on the stone.
Well, you could add, you could research it and add the information, but yeah,
definitely.
in this particular cemetery, that particular section didn't have stones at all. But you'd have to do some research on it. But it would be an interesting thing. You could go through a whole section and say, look, here's 450 dead kids who, if they were born today, would be fine.
No, you could totally do that. You know, if you look at the death records, and a lot of those have been put online by historical societies,
Right.
you could very easily say, look, this family lost 5 kids to.
Yeah, I don't know. It sounds like it should be it should be a very convincing thing, but the research doesn't suggest that is actually a great way of convincing people. The best thing that you can do to convince people to vaccinate is to emphasize the fact that everybody else vaccinates.
Yeah.
You have to stay positive, and you have to make them think that they're doing what everybody else is doing. I
mean, some of them are aggressively, like, so clearly selfish. They think, well, yeah, therefore me and my kids won't get it.
Well,
right.
I'm
just going to ride the herd immunity, baby.
Yeah, I'm not sure that people actually. I mean, I think that people make excuses like that, and we're great at creating our reasons for doing things after the fact. You know, and you can't just tell them that everybody else is doing it. You also have to require it.
Well, yeah,
the law, and that when like in California, you to take those personal exemptions and that sort of thing, but you have to remove the barriers to, well as remove the excuses, and but then you've got, when it comes to convincing people to do or the right thing to do, the thing that seems to work is everybody else is doing it. Save your child's life. That doesn't seem to register with people because they've been told that it's going to hurt their child. So I think you need a combination of making it the thing you have to do and you're supposed to do. But if you're trying to convince people that it's the right thing to do or it's the best thing to do, telling them that it's what everybody else does is the thing that seems to work.
Or just banish them all to some plague island full of raw water.
Yeah. I don't know.
But the thing about filming the graves, I think, is a problem, is that so many of them would be things like smallpox and polio, which are bad. But you get the anti-vaxxers who are just, well, but those are gone. I mean,
because
so much
sanitation.
Yeah, that we don't give smallpox vaccine anymore.
To show to show deaths from things like measles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
things that we still vaccinate for. Sure.
Yeah.
Things that people think kids are supposed to get.
Yeah.
They're supposed to get those things because then they build immunities, and that's bullshit, of course. But those are the things that.
Yeah, you didn't see people giving
chickenpox and measles,
smallpox parties. Polio party at my house.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
All right.
Worst party ever.
Yeah.
Just looking to see if there were any questions. Oh, Nathan Miller's pointed out that he says some cemeteries have sections specific to an epidemic. If they had to bury a lot of people at the same time. Several nearby where he lives have one or more dedicated sections to yellow fever.
Wow. Huh.
And
they're plague cemeteries, of course.
Yeah.
This country.
Yeah.
And a surprising number of unmarked graves around Nathan's house. I don't know what that's about.
Yeah.
Where we live, there are itty bitty, teeny weeny graveyards every block or so. It's very strange.
Yeah. No, they really do have like something that will have maybe 25, possibly a family graveyard.
Yeah, they're
Yep.
family
Back in the day.
graveyards.
That
Yeah.
sort of thing. Oh.
I'm okay graveyards. I think they're a waste of resources.
I want to be to donate my body to the Mythbusters because this human analog shit is not
late,
good enough. Just inject me back into the carbon cycle. Boom.
Shoot you into a wall.
Yeah.
Yep.
That would be great. And I'd make a really funny face.
Yeah. I don't think the people at the network would.
You don't think they'd go for that?
No.
Why not?
All right.
Probably not.
Bummer.
Probably not.
All right. We have any announcements?
Nope.
Not really.
I'm
giving a paper in Florida, but that's not a
Nope.
skeptic thing.
The last show that we did, I talked about the homeopathy thing that the FDA is doing, and the comment period is still open. So if you go to my Twitter feed, twitter.com/Krelnick, Krelnik, the pinned tweet right at the top of my feed has the link directly to where you can comment if you want to comment on what the FDA is doing to regulate homeopathy. Hopefully give them some positive feedback, because needless to say, a lot of homeopaths are coming in there. And when we did the show 2 weeks ago, I guess, it only had 6 comments there. And as of a few days after that, somebody commented on the YouTube. There were only 9 comments.
Oh, God.
There's several hundred. So
287. I have safely and effectively used homeopathic remedies by myself and my family, and I strongly oppose any interference or regulation.
Of course, yeah. So
comment.
skeptics, get in there and tell them
Get
they need
your
to regulate
asses
it.
in gear. I would like to see Steve Novella pick this up.
Yeah.
And make the case, this is what we have to do. I guarantee you, I was talking to a fellow, Michael Weinstein. Did I get that right?
We'll fix it in post.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was having a brain fart there. But he was telling me about a working group on Lyme disease that was being put together as part of an HHS, Health and Human Services, official study group to compile the studies and to make a report to lawmakers. And it was packed by fucking quacks and Lyme literate con artists. And there are no skeptics on there. And there should be skeptics on these goddamn things.
Yeah.
Really should be. This should be a priority for skeptics.
Yeah.
So go, guys, you do that.
When they originally had their hearings that were the an earlier stage of this same rulemaking, there were skeptics that showed up. I know Michael, now I'm having a brain fart, but the former policy director for CSI.
Weinberg.
Dodora. Yeah, Dodora.
Michael Dodora testified, and I think somebody from Science-Based Medicine testified. I don't know if it was Novella or one of the other ones, one of the other docs. But so there was skeptic representation during the official testimony, but of course there were a bunch of quackaroonies in it too. So yeah, we need to get aware and get involved in these things because
the industry will take absolutely everything if they fucking can.
Yeah.
I think is the moral of this last couple of months.
Who's got a book?
I do.
Okay. Whoops. I need to click over here. Go ahead, Barbara.
It seems almost redundant to single out examples of vanity among genuine celebrities. Suffice to say, most of the entertainers I've met exhibit a strong sense of vanity, whatever their levels of attractiveness or talent. Think of the celebrities who appear in so-called candid photos every week, caught heading to the grocery store with their hair and makeup done and sporting 4-inch heels, Or consider the celebrity who's caught in an unflattering photo only to invite showers of praise a few months later for their remarkable weight loss or sudden fresh-faced appearance. And remember, vanity isn't always about appearance. When a book called Trump Nation, The Art of Being the Donald, reported that Donald Trump's net worth was between 150 and 250 million, instead of the billions he claimed, Trump sued the author and publisher for $5 billion in damages, alleging that the claim hurt his brand and reputation.
Wow. Okay, who's next? Eve?
The newspapers covered the story widely, but the information they gave was not terribly helpful. The Edinburgh Annual Register described John Turner, a witness to a crime, as being about 6 feet in height, while the Times said he was a short man with a lame leg. The Morning Chronicle described his large red whiskers, but thought he was about 5 feet 9 inches, and not lame. Turner, therefore, was either tall, short, or in between. He was lame, or possibly not, and he had large red whiskers, unless he didn't. This was a description of a man who had stood in front of journalists at an inquest. Imagine how reliably the papers described the man briefly seen by Turner, or those who had been glimpsed running away from the Mars house.
Bob?
For centuries, Europeans could sustain little more than lightly manned trading posts in Africa. Malaria and other African diseases to which the Europeans had no immunity usually killed half of any group within a year of their arrival on the continent. That mortality rate, writes historian Philip Curtin, was, quote, simply too high for more intensive occupation.
Matty Telemachus left his body for the first time in the summer of 1995 when he was 14 years old. Or maybe it's more accurate to say that his body expelled him, sending his consciousness flying on a geyser of lust and shame. Just before it happened, he was kneeling in a closet, one sweaty hand pressed to the chalky drywall.
Okay.
Damn.
All right, Barb?
What the hell are you reading?
I may have actually read from this before on the show. It is the Mirror Effect, How Celebrity Narcissism is Seducing America by Dr. Drew and Mark Young.
All right, Eve?
I have also possibly read from my book before. It is The Invention of Murder, How the Victorians Reveled in Death and Detection and Created Modern Crime by Judith Flanders. It's really good, and I'm making my students read it.
Bob?
My book was Sonia Shaw's The Fever, How Malaria Has Ruled Humankind for 500,000 Years. The Fever.
I recognize that book.
Yeah, I went through a whole disease period.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really did.
It's called
Yeah, me too.
Also, you like reading
Moonbenders.
about it.
Oh.
It's a novel, and I don't think it's particularly skeptical, but there's a character in it who's clearly based on James Randi.
Ah.
All right. And that brings us to the end of the show, unless anybody has anything else to add.
Could keep me here a minute longer if you tried.
All right, so now it's time to dance. Whoops.
We need music.
Just dance the screen beats in your head, Barb.
The Virtual Skeptics is an independent production of what'sbehind.net, Skeptical Humanities, Brian Gregory, ICBS Everywhere, and Doubtful News. Our logo was designed by Sarah Mayhew at sarahmayhew.com. And our theme music that you are hearing
Shadow
now
Puppets.
is
Arm
by
King.
Musicant and is used with permission.